It's a very interesting question I saw, which I was going to start with. It's connected to kibud vaem. It's about respecting your father and mother, yeah. The traditional explanation given for why one should respect their father and mother, the standard explanation is it's like paying back a debt, the Jerusalem Talmud says. Your parents brought you into the world, so you have to repay the debt. Which touches on an interesting philosophical question, which is, are we better off for having been created? Are we better off for having been created? Because if someone's going to assume we're not better off for having been created, we shouldn't be paying back the debt. We should not say thank you to our parents for creating us, because they actually shouldn't have created us. Would have been better off had we not been created. So that's the question to start off with, which is twofold. First of all, are we better off being created? Second of all, if we're not better off, should we be saying thank you for anything? Right, but are we better off? Would we have been better off had we not been created? So if I'm understanding correctly, an argument could be made as follows. If we judge everything as utilitarian, when it comes to judging good and bad, there are different ways of judging it. Some people judge it by pleasure and suffering, right? So you'd have to evaluate, does a person on average suffer more or enjoy their life more? And if they enjoy their life more, then it's good to be created. And if they suffer more, it's bad to be created. So let's take someone who grew up in a poor family. He probably suffered a lot in his life. So for him, it's better to not be created. Someone who grew up in a rich family, for him, it's better to be created. He's saying for Michael Jackson, it's better to have been created than not. But let's take someone who never became successful, somebody who was born with a certain, let's say disease, mental illness, or whatever it is, or someone who just grew up in a very hard circumstance and ended up suffering a lot, right? Would you say such a person had a good life or a bad life? If you take their whole life, are they better off living, or would they have been better to not be created? So should such a person respect their father and mother? It's an interesting question. Why do we respect our father and mother? Why did Hashem tell us to respect our father and mother? The standard explanation is that we respect our parents.
Respect or honor?
Honor and respect, both. The Sefer Haredim writes, even have to love them. Right? The question is, why? So if it is because they brought you into this world, like the Sefer HaChinuch writes, a very famous rabbi wrote, that it's because they brought us into this world. That's the standard explanation. So they created us. The mere fact that we're alive is thanks to them. So we should repay their kindness by, giving them, helping them get dressed, food, drink, feeding them. But if us being alive is a bad thing, we would better have been not created, right? So such a person, should they be grateful to their parents? So the question is, so how do we decide if someone is grateful? How do we decide if someone should be alive? Do we decide that someone should be thankful to his parents for being alive? Is it because they have a good life? Is it because they've got a life full of pleasure and with little suffering? Is that what makes a life good? In which case, if someone has a bad life and suffers a lot, they should not honor their parents. Is that reasoning sound?
Yeah.
So would you tell someone who, let's say, is suffering, okay, don't respect your parents because you're better to not have been created? Or would you say, maybe other than pleasure and suffering, there's other values which makes life valuable? Why is life important? Let me ask that way. To serve God. So we should thank our parents for creating us, that way we can serve God. Therefore, even if someone suffers, their life is still good, in which case they should still honor their parents. Right? So I'm going to maybe mention other reasons to respect father and mother. So one reason is never the only reason. So we never define a law by the reasons given for it. But given this explanation, I saw a very interesting theory. The Talmud discusses a debate between Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel and Shammai, whether or not we're better off to have been born or not. Right? Now, Tosfot writes that while the conclusion is we're better off to not have been born, nonetheless, a righteous person, a tzaddik, he is better off to have been born. One could argue the reasoning is as follows. This world is full of suffering and pain and not good. However, the world to come, that is very good. So therefore, we should thank our parents for creating us, not for this world, but because a righteous person has the right to the world to come. Yeah. Now, what defines a righteous person is unclear. We don't know what a righteous person is. But what we could discuss is, right, Tosfot doesn't give this explanation, but we can presume the reason is because of the world to come. A person who is a righteous person, we can presume the reasoning would be because they have a world to come, and that's going to be much better. So if you think of it from a utilitarian perspective, if you want to judge suffering and pleasure, someone might suffer in this world, but he'll have a lot of pleasure in the world to come. So he's better off to be created and live in this world, even if he's going to suffer, as long as he'll be a righteous man, because then in the world to come, he'll enjoy himself, and therefore he should now give gratitude to his parents and honor them, because they created him and he has to repay that kindness. And him being born is a good thing because he's a righteous man who's going to make it to the world to come. Now, the Mishnah in Kiddushin, Tractate Kiddushin, says that for one mitzvah, a person can get the world to come. A person keeps one mitzvah, he can have the world to come. Now, the Talmud might understand it to mean that a person is done 50-50, and every mitzvah should be viewed as the one mitzvah which can tilt the scale. Meaning, let's say someone lived his life, right, and he's done an exactly 50-50 amount of mitzvot. Every mitzvah can tilt the scale, so essentially it's one mitzvah which is causing him to inherit the world to come. The Jerusalem Talmud is a different explanation. The Jerusalem Talmud explains that it means if there's even one individual mitzvah, a person keeps thoroughly throughout his whole life without violating, then this mitzvah will be a reason for him to inherit the world to come. So now the Rambam in his Pirush Mishnah is, whenever we say Kaddish after davening, we say Rabbi Hananya ben Akashia Omer. We say the Mishnah before Kaddish and davening. Yeah. So does anyone know what that Mishnah says? After Shachris ends, the rabbi would often, I don't know, do they do this here? The rabbi would after davening ends in many shuls, they'll say, okay, let's do a quick Mishnah and then we'll do another Kaddish. Yeah. So what's that Mishnah? It's Rabbi Hananya ben Akashia Omer. Rabbi Hananya ben Akashia would say, God wanted to be mizakeh Jews. He wanted to, be kind to the Jews. So he gave them many, many mitzvot and Torah, right? So the Rambam asks, why is many mitzvot good for the Jews? It just means more mitzvot they could potentially not keep. Isn't that what it means? Why is it that we're better off with more mitzvot? So the Rambam says, because if a Jew keeps even one mitzvah thoroughly and properly, he's guaranteed a share in the world to come. So the more mitzvot there are, the more mitzvot a Jew can theoretically keep properly, and therefore he's got a higher chance of making it to a guarantee to a share in the world to come. That's what the Rambam explains. Rabbi Yosef Engel has an interesting theory where he explains like this. We're better off to have not been created. And that is true, unless someone keeps one mitzvah thoroughly. So if someone keeps the mitzvah of respecting their father and mother, he's better off for having been created. So something very unique about the mitzvah of respecting your father and mother, which is that the very mitzvah itself is what justifies the mitzvah. Normally, a mitzvah is worth it because it gives you a utility from a different perspective. But respecting your father and mother it's only a mitzvah. You only should respect them if you're better off for having been created. But if you respect them, you'll have a share in the world to come. So that in turn makes it better for you to have been created. A person might be better off for having not been created because there's a lot of suffering in the world. So it's better that he's never been created, right? So it's better that he's never been created. However, if he's a righteous man who does one mitzvah very properly, then he's going to have a share in the world to come. So he is better off for being created. If a person does one mitzvah thoroughly, he has a share in the world to come. So therefore, he's better off for having been created. Then this person has a mitzvah to respect his father and mother and to honor them, right? Because he's better off for having been created. But if a person didn't do a mitzvah thoroughly, he's not better off for having been created. So this person shouldn't respect his father and mother. The question is, are we better off? Or are we better off not being? Is our existence better or worse than the lack thereof? We can't know any difference. But if, let's say, I'll think of a person who was born and he'll suffer his whole life. He was born and he suffers his whole life. We can assume this person, it's better for him to have not been created. Right? Because he's suffering his whole life. But the person who suffered his whole life, even if someone had a tough childhood, if he then overcame it, you could say he didn't suffer his whole life. But if someone didn't overcome his suffering and he's born and he died his whole life, suffered, to tell this person that he's better off for having been created, I think it's fair to say, no, he's better off to not having been created, right? Life is valuable in the sense that once a life exists, you can't kill it. But unborn life or potential life is not valuable at all. If someone, let's say, chooses, I won't get married and I won't have kids, we won't tell him, how dare you, what about those potential kids you could create? And life is valuable, right? Life is only valuable once it exists. If the life would never come to be, if someone just never gets married, never has kids, that potential life is not of value. It's only of value once it's life. A human being is infinitely valuable because he was created. Had he not been created, there's no value in creating him. There's no value in creating more people, unless there's a need for the world or for other people, or unless you could justify for living people why you need more people. But in and of itself, for more people to exist is of no value, I would argue. What I'm arguing for is if, let's say, someone has a boy and a girl. Someone got married, he has a boy and a girl. And he says, you know what? I don't want to have any more kids. Would we say, well, how dare you? What about the potential life that you could in the future create? You wouldn't say that, right? Because it's not born yet. It's not created yet. If it's already born, it's already in existence, then this individual life is of value. Does that make sense?
Depends what the argument of. Is it fair to bring someone into this world? For example, you can have religious families who have so many children, and within that family, there's a lot of children suffering because they're going without. I don't know, just for example.
So what do you think? Do you think it's right to create such a child?
No.
So if it's not right,
It depends on certain.
so if it's not right, why should this child? If it's not right, why should this child respect his parents for creating him? Weren't they wrong for creating him?
Well, my view is different than yours. As in, I don't. If it's a case of them suffering, and it was a selfish, like, you don't have to respect that.
You have to honor them. The mitzvah of honoring them. Do you have to repay the kindness of them creating you if they shouldn't have created you in the first place? It's a hard question. But if we take into account the world to come, even if someone suffers a lot in this world, he'll enjoy himself in the world to come, which is infinite, and this world is only temporary. So he's still better off for having been created because he'll have the world to come. Right? So essentially what it boils down to...
On the basis he's following the right path.
Or at least one mitzvah he does properly. Right? So what it boils down to, if someone does one mitzvah properly, he'll have a share in the world to come. But if someone doesn't, he won't have a share to the world to come. But be that as it may, if somebody keeps one mitzvah properly, have a world to come, thereby it's better for him to be created. So if someone respects his father and mother, which is a mitzvah, him respecting this mitzvah means he'll have a share in the world to come. So because he does this mitzvah properly, actually it's better for him to be created. He's better off for having been created because he fulfills this mitzvah properly and has a share in the world to come. Right? So because he has a share in the world to come, because he fulfills this mitzvah, therefore he's better off for having been created, and therefore he needs to respect his parents. So the only reason he needs to respect his parents is because of the mitzvah of respecting his parents. There's something unique about this mitzvah, whereby the mitzvah itself justifies itself. It's very counterintuitive. Whereby, if not for this mitzvah, you wouldn't have to respect your father and mother. But because your parents said to respect your father and mother, now it makes sense to respect your father and mother. I'm saying that if not for the mitzvah, you would have been better off for having not been. You would have been better off not being created. You would have been better off not created because you're living a life of misery and you won't have a share in the world to come. But when God commanded us with this mitzvah, by respecting your father and mother, you'll have a share in the world to come, right? Therefore, you're better off for having been created, and therefore you actually do need to respect your father and mother. Makes sense now.
Right.
Your parents might have been good parents. It's just that they're, let's say, very poor, or a child's born with a disability, or who knows what. Yeah.
Or mistakes happen, or circumstances that they couldn't look
or
after.
all life, or maybe even a good person's life is not worth living because we don't know the absence of it. Maybe not living is actually better than living, half your life good, half your life bad. You're just better off having not lived. Also, a person sins a lot in his life. Maybe he's better off having not been born and not sinned so much. Right? Yeah. So we can't estimate the value of life, of having been created. Again, that's different from a living life. We don't know the value of a life to be created. But what we do know is that if he does a mitzvah properly, he'll have an eternal share in the world to come. And by Now this is Rabbi Yosef Engel's explanation. It's what you call a pilpul. But there are a lot of other explanations and reasons for the mitzvah of respecting father and mother, other than gratitude for creating you. And you never should look at the reason for a mitzvah and limit the mitzvah by the reason. And I'll just give very quickly. I'll give an example for another reason for the mitzvah. The Rambam in his Moreh Nevuchim writes that the Torah was given to rectify the person, to help the person grow in two fields: his soul and his body, both the soul and his body. By soul, he means spiritually, and by his body, he means to have a better life physically. Yeah. So Rabbi Antoli, who was a philosopher, he wrote about kibud vaem. Mitzvah comes to help the person's body and his soul. It comes to rectify both. To help. Yes, that's good for the Sundays we do. He also writes that Shabbat is for that, to help you physically and spiritually. Why? Because we eat a lot, we enjoy ourselves, and spiritually because you can spend time studying Torah and thinking about God's greatness and praying, and so that's why it's for both.
But that's not.
So Rabbi Antoli explains that the mitzvah has a benefit for the body and for the soul. For the soul, because if someone respects and honors his parents are going to keep giving him good advice and make sure he stays on the right and narrow way. But he says that for the body, he says something very interesting. He says, James Baldwin once said that kids never listen to their parents, but they never fail to imitate them. So if somebody takes care of his parents, his kids will take care of him when he'll be older. That's the nature of people. There's a story, they say, the Ben Ish Chai quote, but it comes from Eliyahu HaKohen. Eliyahu HaKohen was maybe 500 years ago. He wrote, I think Megalit Tzvunot, I think was the name of his book. He wrote his famous book is Midrash Talpiot, and he writes the story. And later after him, the Grimm's brothers have a very, very similar story to this story. The story goes as follows: you've got a kid, and his grandfather has been kicked out of the house for years, and he walks down the street where all the poor people live, and he sees his grandfather, who was kicked out of the home. He sees him without a coat, and it's the winter, and it's cold. So he tells his father, "I just saw my grandfather, your father. I saw him on the street, and by the way, all the homeless are, and it's very cold. So can I get him a coat because it's cold out there?" So his grandfather tells him, "Oh, sure, go to the attic. I'm sure we have an extra coat up there somewhere." So he goes upstairs. He goes to grab the coat, and he comes down. And he tears the coat in half. So his father asks him, "Why do you tear the coat in half? Wouldn't your grandfather prefer a complete coat?" So he says, yeah, grandfather would probably prefer a complete coat, but I'll go give him the half now. When I'll grow up, and I'll kick you out of my home because you'll get too old for me, and my kid's going to come and ask me for a coat for you, I'll give him the other half." So the story goes that he realized his mistakes, and then he went and brought his father back home, and very wise is the child. Yeah, the Grimm's brothers, the Grimm's brothers didn't make up their own stories. They wrote down all the stories which are legends in Germany. And they wrote a very similar story to this. There's a Chinese version of it, and there are many different versions of this story. So it could be that we took a popular story and we had our own version of it. I don't know if we're the original. Don't know if we're the original, but this story predates the Grimm's brothers. Eliyahu HaKohen lived before the Grimm's brothers. But again, the Grimm's brothers didn't make up their own stories. They just wrote famous stories. So even if, let's say, one were to conclude that it's better off to not having been born, and therefore we shouldn't respect our father and mother, that's only one reason for the mitzvah. And there are many other explanations for the mitzvah. But also I'd like to finish off with a very quick point, which I think someone's mentioned earlier, which is that it could be argued that even a life of suffering is a life worth living, and that's debated also, which means Rabbi Yosef Engel assumes that if someone suffers in his life, doesn't enjoy his life, he's better off for having not been born. Or if someone sins his whole life, he's better off for having not been born, and therefore he doesn't have to respect his father and mother. And again, this is based on the Talmud we've quoted earlier. However, it could be argued that one has to respect his father and mother, even if he would have theoretically been better off for having not been born because he suffers or because he would sin a lot in his life, because the mere opportunity to do right and to be a tzaddik is something worth being born for and showing and being thankful to your parents for, even if you would have been better off for having not been born. The mere opportunity of life is something to be thankful for, even if we would have been better off not been born. With that, I'll conclude.